Today, I have a video from Brad Polumbo breaking down his debate with Dean Withers in front of the Aspen Institute. I'm going to go ahead and bring Mr. Brad on. I'll be pausing intermittently in order to share my thoughts.
Event I did with the Aspen Institute at their Ideas Festival alongside liberal TikTok star Dean Withers and a conservative influencer named Jamie Franklin. The panel was hosted by Jack Blanchard of Politico. Before we get into all that, as you guys know, my life is still in chaos. I just moved into this new Miami apartment, so no, this is not
Based, he's in Miami.
Not a good setup. I was just trapped in airport hell, got stuck in Aspen because of winds, had to drive all the way to Denver and then take a red eye. So yes, I look tired. No, I'm not at my most stunning or gorgeous today, but I am still dedicated and contractually obligated to bring you a show today. So you know what? We're going to do it and we're going to make it work. All right. So without further ado, the topic of the panel was about Gen Z and how TikTok has changed youth politics. And so we had an interesting conversation about that and about the rise of new media versus mainstream media. But there were a couple heated points, particularly that came up around the topic of why it is exactly that the Democratic Party and the left have lost the support of Gen Z men. Dean and I had very different theories about why that's happening. Let's take a look at the clip. I see Gen Z men skewing right and Gen Z women skewing left, perhaps more so than other generations. I certainly didn't anticipate this because when I started my career, it was all about how young people love socialism, young people were very left-wing. I think the pandemic changed things for a lot of people. I think they lost trust in a lot of institutions. School closures were really harmful, and they happened everywhere, but they were significantly worse in many blue states under many Democratic governors, and people hold them accountable for that. Then I also think, and TikTok amplified this to some extent, there was a cultural narrative that I don't endorse what a lot of them flocked to, in that I'm very critical of Trump, I'm very critical of kind of modern right-wing politics, but that pushed a lot of young Gen Z men away from the left and away from the cultural left that Gen Z women, many were drawn to. I mean, you can only hear like explicitly said that men are trash so many times on social media before you start listening to terrible people like Andrew Tate, who tell you actually men are awesome, right? And so, but whether it's that, why did I make that
kind
face?
Of the Democratic Party's embrace of an identity politics that in certain spheres makes young white heterosexual men in particular feel like they're problematic by virtue of their existence. And I think the Democrats, many have started to reckon with and move away from that. But peak 2020 era, it was pretty extreme. And I think a lot of that fueled people towards Joe Rogan or these other platforms that then liberals pretty foolishly seeded, right? Part of the reason that many of these podcasts skewed so right-wing is because the hosts actually don't know anything about politics, so can just be led wherever they want by the guests. And for a long time, many Democrats and progressives wouldn't go on them. They didn't want to, talk to... Oh my God, this is like talking points. No offense, Brad, but let's get cracking, okay? Oh, holy shit.
These young men who've been pushed away.
And I mean, the left can't even say what a woman is at this point.
Oh my God, I hate people like this so fucking much. Does it ever get tiring? Like MAGA people, does it ever get tiring when people just pander to you with the most stupid fucking things like ever? Does it ever get exhausting when they're like, they can't even define what a woman is? Listen. If you want to not have the most stupid online internet experience in the world, then you need to seek out the steelmen of your opponent's opposition. Progressives and liberals, there's something called gender abolition. It's people who want to eliminate gendered categories, and there's schizophrenic elements of the left. They're very loud, but they're very rare. What most progressives and liberals say, which I agree to a certain degree, is that sex can be biologically rooted, but there's a lot of nuances to sex. Like there's intersex people or whatever who have various genetic issues that make them not stereotypical of the sex binary between male and female.
But I think that it's sufficient to say, this is where I get a little bit more conservative, is that for male, it's effectively small gametes. It's testes, right? And for females, it's people who have a uterus and ovaries, right? That's the distinction between these two categories. And then there's a whole host of social behavior that correlates with this sex binary. And so as a result, her having long hair is not dictated by sex. It's dictated by social style. Her showing off her chesticles and shoulders the way that she does is not dictated by sex. You could argue that it's biologically rooted, that she is trying to flatter all of her best attributes in the hopes of attracting a partner. But it's not like she could wear a burqa and still be considered a female. Like that's the whole point. So when you say that the left doesn't understand what a woman is, it's like there's gender abolitionists, they're cringe, but broad swaths of the left just have a differentiation between sex and gender performance versus actual biological sex.
And so they can't define what a woman is. And so when you can't even define to younger people what a
adult human female is typically the former definition of a woman, and then we could add in trans women who are males who want to socially perform as women. Easy. And be recognized as women. And you could flip the definition for the opposite.
What a woman is, and you're telling people to use their pronouns all the time, and you're telling people if their certain race or their gender is bad, you're going to see...
Holy shit, the fact that this passes for conservative talking points makes me want to kill myself.
People are alienated by that.
Regardless if you agree or disagree, is that you feel like the messaging that was coming from the left at that period of time was alienating for a lot of young people. That's basically what you're saying. Whether you agree or disagree with the political points, it's exactly what Brad was saying as well. Do you agree with that?
Phenomenal. Well, I think from a position of privilege, equality can seem like oppression. And I think something that the left has really failed at in recent history is finding a way to make that clear with the use of educational content and not saying, just coming out with like the one-liners of, I don't know, like men suck or whatever. But I don't know. I haven't heard that. I'm a man. I'm huge in left-leaning politics.
Wow. So
Holy shit, I hate Dean Withers. Let's see what Brad has to say.
there's a lot to unpack about that clip. Really, I know it was a long one, but I just wanted to let it roll so you guys got a sense of the exchange and the dialogue. And I rolled my eyes multiple times during that when other people were speaking. I mean, I agree kind of with what Jamie was saying, but the way she phrased it was a little bit cringe. And then when Dean said, well, sometimes when you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression, I just about rolled my eyes so hard I gave myself a concussion. Seriously. Like, especially because in the same verbal paragraph, he said, Democrats need to stop these one-liners. Babe, you just did a cringe one-liner literally like 5 seconds ago. Rewind the tape. But it's just funny to me because that is something you hear. But what's interesting is that there's a false premise baked into that statement that when you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression. The Democratic Party pretty openly doesn't stand for equality, right? What does DEI stand for? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not diversity, equality, and inclusion. And many of the democratic and liberal policies that I was criticizing here in the identity politics realm are explicitly anti-equality because they embody the equity ethos of we need reverse discrimination, and we need to right historical injustices with current discrimination to fix it. I mean, this is explicitly the kind of DEI rhetoric that's embodied in many democratic and liberal policies. So to say equality feels like oppression, our whole issue...
Brad is very verbose, and so I'm going to bump him up to 1.1.
is that it hasn't been equality. It is not equality when people are racially discriminated against and held to different standards in higher education admissions. But that's the affirmative action regime that Democrats in lockstep defended, that held Asians and whites to a much higher standard than other races in terms of GPA and SAT score. And it is incredibly statistically apparent when you look at the numbers. This all came out during the Supreme Court case about it. In the same way, It is not equality when you're a Democratic president in Joe Biden and you specifically say, I will only appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court for my nomination. So you just categorically rule out most of the legal community, right? Most white women, all men of all races. Same thing with his vice president. He said, I will only pick a woman. And I'm strongly leaning towards a woman of color.
Okay, I feel like I have to steelman the progressive line of argumentation, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. I do like that Brad is independent and is effectively calling out, you know, the right wing on their bullshit while also calling the left wing out on their bullshit. So the steelman of the progressive perspective here, though, is that the Supreme Court is 9 people, I think it's 9, who decide some of the most important cases in the country. And the prerequisites for it are being like a talented and insightful lawyer. Right? That's like the prerequisites for it. I'm sure you have to be a judge at some point, but I don't know the prereqs for the Supreme Court of the United States. So the point is that in a country of 330 million people, there is a black woman who is qualified and intelligent and has the right resume in order to be a Supreme Court justice. Whereas if we look through nepotism and cronyism that's been instantiated through generations of racial preference, then a vast majority of the candidates are going to be white men or white women or Hispanic men or black men, I guess, right? And so the whole point of that is there hasn't been a black female Supreme Court nominee. So if there's a qualified one, we should go out of our way to find her in order to try to diversify the court. Now, I'm more sympathetic to whoever is best for the job is best for the job, and we shouldn't look at immutable characteristics. However, that's the steel man of the argument, and I don't like it when people pretend to be confused by the steel man. The steel man makes sense if you're progressive.
Narrowing the list down to just a couple people out of all these potential candidates in the Democratic Party, that is not equality. So no, it's not that people feel.
And I do prefer equality, quote unquote. I don't even believe in equality, but I believe in equality of opportunity over equality or equity.
Feel like, oh, I'm used to this comfort and privilege, and discrimination, which historically absolutely has existed against women and in favor of men. But it's not that, well, you know, now we just stand for equality and people who are used to privilege don't like that. It's like, no, equality is not in the room with us. We've had this toxic, discriminatory, divisive approach to identity taken in the name of equity that is at its core anti-equality. Seriously, the Republican position has been equality under the law on many of these issues, and the Democratic position has been woke reverse discrimination. So no, it's not just that white men flock to right because white heterosexual men in particular, because they're used to privilege and they're mad about equality. That's not it at all. And I'm surprised Dean doesn't get it a little.
I don't know. I think there is some racial resentment. I think there's white racial resentment at being villainized the entire time. And so a lot of people, excuse me, they'll use this meme, right? And so equality is everybody gets like a box, right? Now, number one, the funny thing about this meme is people, if you can't see your screen, it's 3 people trying to watch a business game. They're trying to watch a baseball game over a fence. And the meme about this is, why the hell aren't they paying to watch the baseball game? What a bunch of cheap bastards. But anyways, equality is pointed out as we give everybody the same thing, even if ultimately their needs are different. And as a result, you know, people don't achieve the same results, which is just true and natural. Equity, which I think, you know, we're progressives are trying to push towards, is that we get the results we desire because we design policy around it. So for instance, this guy who's already tall doesn't get 2 boxes, the super short person gets 2 boxes, and the mildly short person gets 1 box, so everybody can enjoy the game. And I think the implication of this art is the fact that this person doesn't need it, but they can all enjoy the game together, so they're all pushing in the same direction. This feels inherently socialistic and communistic. It's like from each according to his ability and each according to his needs. And it's not recognizing the fact that this guy might resent the fact that even though they're quote unquote working towards a shared goal, he's effectively laboring in order to subsidize people who can't take care of themselves. And that is like a primal psychological thing in human beings. And then this is the point from an economic standpoint, is that socialists and communists are often arguing about equality and equity. But capitalism is so abundant and is so rich that oftentimes the least amongst us are still wildly able to profit off of our society. And that's why the capitalism meme of this is effectively showing that we have so many fucking boxes we don't even know what to do with it. And I kind of agree with this. I agree with capitalism. That's why, you know, whenever an abundance lib talks about deregulation of small businesses or what's the other thing, like cutting through red tape in order to create infrastructure projects that make better communities. That's why I agree with that, because I think mixed economy capitalism is a vibrant and powerful force. Anyways, back to the content. I promise I'll get back to chats momentarily.
A little bit more, just because also he hasn't encountered particular rhetoric and ecosystems and spaces. Well, he's also very young, and I
don't believe that Dean Withers hasn't seen anti-white racism and TikTok lefty shit. I feel like he's just saying like, well, that's not my experience, as a online caveat, as a rhetorical caveat.
Chatted with him. He seems like a really nice guy. I think he's really smart, but he's also very young. I think he's like 21. And so when a lot of this peak identity stuff was happening, he would have been like 14, 15, right? During the 2020 era. So I think maybe just because he's missed some of it, or he's not plugged into the online circles where this stuff is still commonplace, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Now we're going to get to this next clip where I did call out Dean directly. No shade, just a little bit of shade, but we're going to get to that. But first, make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button while you're at it. Comment with your thoughts. Check out the merch linked in the description. Subscribe to my second channel and send in your voicemails for Voicemail Friday episodes where I react to your woke horror stories and your personal life scenarios and give you my honest advice and feedback. The link.
I think Brad's going to do well. He's already at 200 subs, and obviously this didn't get that many views. It's like at 20,000 over 24 hours. But I think with the right backing, he's going to do well.
To send those in is in the description. Artificial intelligence is the future.
Oh, come on, bud. Let's go. Give me the content. Free advice to Brad Polumbo. Make it snappy.
I did have to call Dean out because he was denying in the course of this conversation the Democrats really
Matter of fact, Brad, you disrespected us with your commercial. So I'm going to disrespect you by reading chat. Tofu says, unrelated, but we got syphilis from Native Americans. I always hear us giving a bunch of diseases to Native Americans, but I never heard them giving us anything. Yay, syphilis based. Sacred Snow says, South Africa also can be solved by using soft power to leverage the South African government to toe down the rhetoric. Trump obviously doesn't care and is pushing Nazi talking points because Musk, they destroyed USAID. Sure. Gray Jedi says, counterpoints, just to be clear, none of my comments have been saying that those murders are okay. I'm just saying that crime level we see in South Africa isn't a surprise based on policies the last 100 years. Sure. LB says, Israel uses American bombs to commit genocide against Palestinians. Oh my God, based Groiper, kill me, please. Cool. Sen Patty says, Connor reads a lot of the chats. He's far behind due to focusing on content as well. It's true. It's true. Master of Darkness says, laugh my ass off. Someone shouted, take off your sunglasses from the audience. Based? And then David Monroe says, no context justifies the farm murders. I'm just saying it's a question of priority and magnitude. We probably agree more than we disagree. Vlad the Kebabber says, you compare a military invasion to barbaric torture. Well, I'm saying both of them should be killed, aren't I? Kale says, Trump is a useful idiot. We thought he was a Russian asset, but no, he's just an anti-war Democrat who is friendly to everyone, including Putin, and his ideas were just useful for Putin at the time. Yeah, probably, but that's a shame because, what is it? Like, Ukraine is getting jacked up for Trump's pacifism. DD22E says, oh no, Connor is going on one of his autistic rants. Hey, that's ableist. All right. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Indeed. All right, back to the content.
Messaging problem. And I did have to bring up his recent experience that I covered on the show where his planned anti-Trump TikTok tour with all the stars from TikTok imploded over microaggressions. Take a listen to this clip.
So about the marketing of the left, I think that the biggest issue with why we've seen this trend in younger Americans.
Sorry, Kay asked an important question. Where can you take a legit IQ test anywhere online? No, it must be administered by a psychologist.
Going more to the right isn't the idea that we don't know how to define what a woman is, but it's more so the idea that the right has been able to ingrain themselves in the culture. Rather, if you're a man going to the gym, looking to your favorite gym influencer on the internet, chances are they support Trump. Or a woman interested in learning how to bake sour bread dough, you were telling me earlier, chances are the content creator giving that to you supports Trump. And I feel like the root of this issue has to do with issues within the DNC and the Democratic Party not necessarily being as good as they could be at their messaging. Now,
on the messaging, though, Dean specifically...
Not as good as they could be. No, I think Democrats are allergic to good messaging.
So,
Yeah.
so you're kind of
You're going to say this without making any political points.
no. I mean, this is specifically about what you asked about.
Okay.
You were just involved in an effort to organize an anti-Trump tour called the
true.
Unfuck America Tour. Well, guess what, guys?
I like this audience.
The Unfuck America Tour descended into chaos over imaginary microaggressions that
Not imaginary microaggressions, real ones. We still don't know what they are, but apparently they're real.
Not true,
occurred in a
Brad.
TikTok live. I watched the whole live. The microaggressions, which is not a real concept, first of all.
Yeah.
To
Yes, it is. You can be rude to people and shitty to people on a small level that feels a little bit racist, but it's not enough to call out.
the extent that it is, there were no microaggressions.
As a matter of fact, since Brad's in Miami, I'm going to go ahead and write down some talking points. Brad Polumbo, microaggressions aren't real. Like, for instance, when Ethan Klein asked not Brad Polumbo, but asked a gay caller whether or not he was a top or a bottom, and because he had an effeminate voice, he said that he was a bottom. Funny and accurate, but could be considered a microaggression because it's like, why are you asking me about my sex life just because I'm obviously gay, right? There's a clip for you. That'd be a good clip. Anyways, the point is that, like, people can ask invasive questions that feel based off of weird, like, ethnic shit. You know what I'm saying? And it can be annoying, but it's a microaggression, not a macroaggression. And we should prioritize what we give a shit about.
On the call. In fact, the white woman accused of microaggression was actually pretty vociferously racially abused by the women on the TikTok live. They tried to organize a tour to resist Trump, all the liberal stars of TikTok, Dean and many of his friends, and it imploded over internal fighting over microaggressions.
True.
If that's not a messaging problem, I don't know what is.
The moderator really didn't want me to get into that, and I understand. I wasn't trying to derail it. I wasn't trying to even take shots at Dean. Like I said, I like Dean. I think he's sharp. I just had to point out that he was saying, well, like, it's the Democratic Party that has messaging problems.
True. No, it's also woke TikTok dickheads. Absolutely.
Our actual message as liberals is strong. And I had to point this out. You literally couldn't even organize a campus tour, all these stars of left-wing TikTok, without the whole thing imploding into a massive scandal of infighting over microaggressions. Like, that's beyond parody. And like I said in the clip, if that's not a messaging problem, I don't know what is. Like, I struggle to imagine a more clear example of that, because you can't even get your advocates out there on the road because you're so consumed by inner civil war over woke absurdity. Like, the Democrats, it's not just the party. It's not just the DNC that has a messaging problem. It is the left. It is liberals and progressives online and in media who still cling to a lot of these absurd ideas. Like, most Black people in America do not think that a microaggression is a real concept. But the TikTok stars,
They do when they're around me.
that somehow big parts of this movement are held hostage to, still buy into this absurd logic that, like, minor verbal tics cause some sort of harm and people need to be held accountable for them. It's all just so antiquated, and it's really holding them back. And as long
I am happy that it's tired. I am happy that a lot of the social justice talking points are tired and they feel exhausting because a lot of the stuff peaked in 2015. And here we are, like, a decade later, still arguing about this shit. And it seems like everybody's exhausted by it, even the people who push the talking points.
as you're in denial about that, I don't really see how you're going to get past it. So that's why I brought it up. It wasn't even
True, but do you know what that's gonna cause? And this is where Brad has to understand the pragmatics of the politics. This is part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. It's going to cause a liberal, progressive civil war on the left, and I think it does need to happen. Liberal versus leftist, civil war on the left versus progressive. I'm going to say progressive and leftist. Because you can be progressive and still be a capitalist. You can be a liberal and still be a capitalist. And then you can be a progressive leftist. I don't think you can be a progressive. You could probably be a progressive liberal, but that just means that you care mostly about social issues and not economics.
trying to shade Dean. It really wasn't. It was just like this.
It should be. Dean deserves shade.
This is a hilarious example that the messengers on the left are the problem as well. Not just the DNC and the Democratic candidates for office. In fact, I think the problems that the Democratic candidates for office and the DNC have are often driven by the fact that they're afraid of the activist and media left. And so they do what they want, or they pander to them in ways that are not palatable to the rest of the country. So I thought that was a funny moment. But the third point that I want to show you from this debate was, I think, potentially the most interesting and the most substantive of anything that we discussed. And it was during the Q&A. None of the questions were like hostile or gotcha or crazy or anything like that, which is always a concern because with live events, Q&As can go off the rails pretty quickly. But one person asked us about freedom of speech and censorship online, because we had talked a lot about the perils of kind of misinformation and fake news and misleading things spreading on TikTok and on other platforms. And I thought we had a really interesting exchange. Take a listen to this.
What is your position on mediated content to reduce the amount of intentionally false information being fed to me?
All right, thank you. That's a very good question. I'm going to start with Brad, actually.
So I think it's a real problem. I see misinformation on TikTok. I see it on X all the time with different political valences. I don't trust any central authority, particularly a government authority, to decide what is true and what is false. And I would
true and based.
Rather have a messy, chaotic, free flow of misinformation than have a centralized authority with that kind of power. That said, I don't think we're helpless in the face of what is a very real problem. I think the solution is teaching people media literacy to critically think, and also community-based things like even Community Notes on X has brutally fact-checked Elon Musk multiple times on his own website. So that's given me some faith that you can implement things that come short of kind of centralized censorship, but still provide context or facts or challenge misinformation or false information that's spreading like wildfire.
I think that
true.
There's a healthy medium. So I think that...
Oh my God, Dean is going to be a real politician. Fuck, I can see it already. Just with the hand gesture and the nod. Fuck, he's going to run for office eventually.
Some of the points that both of you just made about not having a centralized government.
Oh God, is everybody slurring their S's harder because Brad is in the room? Dean, you don't normally talk like this. What the hell?
Kind of decide everything for the...
You're hitting those S's super hard, brother.
Consumers of these platforms and what they can or can't post or what is true and isn't true. I think that there's a lot of scenarios where you guys are spot on. We shouldn't have that because then those who are in power can control, what is true and what is false. So I think that the happy medium is saying, well, okay, here is a base set of facts that can't be false. And if somebody says they're false, take their post down,
No. How did that work? Out in COVID.
I think that
Facebook labeled the lab leak theory disinformation and took down experts. Now the FBI.
If you allow me to finish speaking, Brad, what I'm saying is I don't think that if an election hinged on 50% of the population believing that the Earth was flat, you should be able to go on Twitter and tell 1 million people that the Earth is flat. Now, with that being said, what I will also say is that
he said he doesn't want a central authority to do it, and then he's like, "This is how I would have the central authority do it."
Advent of decentralized forms of accountability, such as Community Notes on X, is something that I love. I couldn't agree with you two more. I think that there should be some base facts that should be protected, not by government, but by the mediators of these platforms. But then anything outside of these base facts...
Yeah, but then how do you not have aligned interest decide what facts are all agreed upon?
That can't be contested regardless of your political ideology, some decentralized forms...
That, to be honest, what's popping into my head is like Holocaust. That's what it actually sounds to me. It sounds like Holocaust denial. He wants, now maybe I'm reading too into it, but it sounds like he wants Holocaust denial to be codified as like terms of service.
Form of accountability, such as Community Notes on X, is a great thing, and on that we can agree completely.
But the facts are the heart of the dispute.
Okay, he's being way too soft for me, and if I feel like the soy corrupting me, I feel like it's seeping into my bones, and so as a result, I feel so soft, I have to get angered by my chat, or else I feel like a soy demon is going to possess my body. So Tofu says... Are you into just 40K or the fantasy Warhammer crap too? I've been putting a lot of hours into Total War Warhammer 3. I'm way more into 40K than I am Warhammer Fantasy, but I could be convinced eventually once I have a little bit more time. Cole, or Kale, it's an A, right? Kale. None of these people, Wolf, calling Nazis and fascists, have ever read Mein Kampf or the Fascist Manifesto. I have an excellent video on my channel about it. Oh, cool. Go check out Kale's Fascist Manifesto video. Master of Darkness says, I hope Brad doesn't get in the way of Dean being able to enjoy a pizza that is sufficiently hot to meet Dean's level of enjoyment. Mean but funny. Charles Burrows says, Counterpoints. Do you have any thoughts on the Stop Killing Games campaign? Yeah, I think it's well-intended, if a bit disorganized. Even if you don't care about video games, the industry has been hostile to consumers, so hopefully something positive happens. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's generally speaking well-intended. Tofu says, why use many word when few do fine? True. Sacred Snow says, D is much closer to Clinton than Mr. Salami. I agree. Unork says, I unliked, so it went down to 69. You're welcome. You son of a bitch, Unork. All right. Scrolling. Alexander says unions are trash, not needed in today's age. Well, we disagree. Master of Darkness says, can they handle it, or do they need to call on more Norks to die for them some more? Based. LB says, Connor, you can have a minimum wage and unions. Yeah, but I don't want a minimum wage. That's very short-sighted. Read the Wobbly's worker movements. You need Lowe's to protect people. You need a min wage. Commerce Clause, U.S. Okay, well, I disagree. Alexander says, unions incentivize laziness and protect terrible employees. Bad unions do, for sure. For sure. There's lots of perverse incentives, brother. There's lots of perverse incentives. Vlad the Kebabber says, Zelensky's supporting legalized prostitution and gay marriage, and he's suppressing the church. Cool. Good for him. Are you MAGA hat InfoWars shirt guy? No, that's not me. Bum number 1 says, Churchill is so badass, a little Indian hate isn't that big of a deal. All right, last one. Unork says, that whole influencing other cultures can be done much easier through diplomacy and the internet now anyways. Physical colonizing invasion seems wildly less productive. Agreed. All right, back to the content. Let's that was enough engaging with chat that I feel the soy subseeding. Seeding? I feel it going away slowly.
I think when you
many cases.
When you censor people, it creates more conspiracies.
So I really enjoyed this exchange, and I like this clip because to me it shows the shortcomings of kind of the milquetoast liberal position on freedom of speech, which always goes something like this. Like, they will absolutely pay homage to, free speech is so important.
Thank you, Gnarly Bonesful, for getting me the original Aspen Institute leak, even though it's way too quiet.
Agree with you, and maybe we don't want the government involved with it, but if these big tech companies want to just censor people who question the facts, that's good and important. And maybe they don't know this, or maybe they do know it, and that's why they support it. But part of the problem is that when I say I don't trust a centralized authority to decide what's true and what's false, I mean the government first and foremost. But I also mean these tech companies, which have done a terrible job.
True, based, Brad. Defer to freedom whenever possible.
At that in recent years, and overwhelmingly their employees skew in one political direction. So even if they tried to do their best job to be fair and neutral, they're still going to have very strong biases that will kind of take the form of their moderation decisions. And I just cannot disagree more profoundly with this idea that, well, we can allow people to have their opinions, but we just have to agree on the baseline facts and then don't let people question the facts. I mean, the problem is that on so many issues, the facts are the dispute. I mean, Democrats believe, for example, that it is a fact that most Democrats, that the transgender representative, Sarah McBride, is a woman. Republicans believe that it is a fact that Sarah McBride is a man. Now, I think we need to have that conversation, but you literally
100%, which is where we need to differentiate between sex and gender. And even if a Republican is like, that's not only, if a Republican hypothetically is like, not only is that a male, meaning that they were born with testes, but they're also a man, meaning that they should socially perform as a male and a man, but they shouldn't perform as a female or a woman, and that is like some kind of affront to their cultural sensibilities, they can have that opinion. As long as they don't physically or verbally harass or attack that person when they see them in public, they can have bad opinions. That's like the whole point of a free country, is you're allowed to have bad opinions. I'm going to keep going through chat because I want to catch up with you guys. Gredai says, you aren't wrong about African countries being corrupt, but what always needs to be said as well is that Europe took over all but one country and had policies that could only be called crimes against humanity. Sure. Weirdly enough, Belgians are like the one country that I was like, oh, they never did anything wrong. And yet the Belgian Congo was one of the most fucked up places on the planet. If you didn't get your rubber quota, they would just like chop off, like your foot or your hand. Ryburio said, wow, he's eating. Unironically thought someone had joined the call. Nope, just muted myself. Sacred Snow says, this is the first time I've seen Polumbo not look immaculate. Either his makeup guy took the day off or Miami nightlife is getting to him. No, he said he just moved. Be nice. Be nice to the gays. Hedonic Treadmill says, been fun hanging out with you in chat. Makes politics seem manageable. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Hedonic Treadmill. Much appreciated. And thank you to all the donors today, by the way. I'm just going to read this, just read off people's names. Manny to the Max, Silver Jacket Man, LB, Larry, Shadow 2 Bravo, Audacity, K, Rizla, Larry Hutch Hutchinson, Team People, Razzle, and Bakar Baridi. Thank you all for the donations. It does mean a lot. All right, let's get back to the content, and I promise that I'll try to get through as much chat as possible.
Cannot, in a situation where one version, and I think we all know which version it's likely to be, is declared the facts, and the people who are questioning the facts get censored by Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or what have you. We all know. I mean, on so many issues.
Grasser Hegemon says, gender is a social construct. Sex is what I have with Brad's mom. Oh, shit. Somebody save that. Somebody save that. Somebody get that over to Destiny. That's an excellent point. Like, next time he's debating somebody about trans issues, he can be like, listen, gender is a social construct. Sex is what I have with your mom. That's a fucking awesome line. Oh, shit. I'm going to DM him. Ah, fuck. Destiny. Quote, gender is a social construct. Sex is what I have with your mom. Steal that from Grassroots Hegemon. Perfect. I'm sure he'll love it.
The facts are the core of the dispute. And also, the idea that there's like some established notion of what the true set of facts isn't correct. We saw this during COVID, where things labeled conspiracy theories or ended up being potentially true, and where claims evolved and shifted over time. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when they told us don't wear masks, then they switched to yes, wear masks. Like, at what point were those the facts and you weren't allowed to question it, right? It's just such a messy endeavor that I think inevitably leads to the squashing of actual debate and disagreement, and kind of perfectly encapsulates the problem I have with the mainstream liberal perspective on free speech, which always falls back on this kind of tyranny of the experts or technocracy of, well, we'll just allow the big platforms to crack down on people who question the facts. Or
see, let me tell you what I like about Brad, okay? So a lot of liberals and progressives do engage in technocracy, appeals to authority, appeals to government or whatever, but that's because they are in power. Whereas a generation or two ago, the scientific consensus was that, like, being homosexual was a psychological disorder. Being trans is still viewed as a psychological disorder, and maybe it should be. Like, gender dysphoria is obviously a psych disorder. But transgenderism itself was kind of stigmatized and villainized in pop culture. And I'm sure some conservatives will be like, yes, it deserves to be. I'm sure they'll say that about gay people too. But if Brad Polumbo is a normie gay, and what I mean by that is he's white and he's cis, but he just happens to be gay, then, 2 generations ago or a generation ago, it was very common for the authorities to hate Brad explicitly. And so Brad has an instinctive distaste and distrust of authoritarian or authority-based institutions. And that kind of lends him over to instead of a liberal ideology, more of a libertarian camp. Now, he says he's independent, so he's probably still a statist. But ultimately, being skeptical of authority, I view as inherently American. Ben Ellis says, sex is defined as something I've definitely had, I swear. Based.
The science. I mean, yeah, even an issue we talk about on this channel a lot, and I don't know what Dean's position is, so I'm not even trying to necessarily say this about him, But the question of minors transitioning and whether it's ethical, whether it's safe, whether it's supported by the data, the facts originally, they told us minors don't get surgeries. That's a fake myth.
PC principal. True. Dean Withers wants to be PC principal.
And we pointed, insurance filings came out that showed thousands of minors getting surgeries. They claim that, this care is life-saving, as I've covered in the show. That is not factually true, but that's a fact.
Hi, Ben Thorpe.
According to many of these liberal media outlets that they would turn to, the tech companies would turn to. They've just parroted this claim from activists. So really what happens then is that one side of debates gets ingrained as the facts, and then the other side gets cracked down upon. And then Jamie mentioned there at the end that it leads to conspiracies. I actually think that's true. Like when you censor people, it doesn't necessarily make them weaker or take away their influence or their followers. I mean, I didn't include this in the clip, but I did bring it up on stage. After 2020 and after the disgrace that was January 6th, the social media companies banned Donald Trump. Facebook, Twitter, all of them literally deleted his accounts. Did he go away? Did he lose support? Was he successfully combated because he questioned the facts of the election? No. It just made people support him more. It made them go to platforms where they only saw people that shared their kind of.
Ben Thorpe says, how could you possibly make an argument for contemporary capitalism, which is obviously soul killing? Because mixed economy capitalism should not be the end all and be all of your life. So I would say that capital L liberalism, meaning maximal freedom from the government, but the government still steps in when it's needed, should be our governing philosophy. I think mixed economy capitalism, meaning that you have a vibrant free market that is taxed in order to support social services that are necessary to keep society stable, I think is the best model compared to socialism. I know fascism isn't an economic model, but compared to fascism or cronyism or whatever, I just don't see a lot of really good alternatives. And then that is politics and economics. But realistically, I don't think that you should be looking for your spiritual fulfillment within the economy or within the government. Your spiritual fulfillment should be personal. So, you should study religion and mythology and philosophy outside of your work and outside of the way that you engage with government.
Conspiratorial views about 2020, like Truth Social and Parler and what have you, it didn't achieve any of the desired goals. And now, look where he is now. Look where our country is now. So this approach of, we'll just allow the enlightened big tech companies to censor and decide one version of the facts has not gone well for the country or for liberals, honestly. So I thought that was a really mistaken and misguided position to take, but I thought it was an interesting exchange and one that revealed a lot about the differences in the way that people like Dean and people like me see the world and see freedom of speech in particular. What do you guys think? Did you enjoy watching these clips? And honestly, I'd be interested in having a longer conversation with Dean in some capacity, in some form in the future, but do let me know. I will link to the full conversation in the description.
Did he? I thought I checked out the description. I didn't see it. Opus clips, debate. Watch the. Damn! It was right here. It was right here, and I missed it the whole time.
I have to put up with that all week in DC. You guys have to put up with all week.
But the reason I say that is correct is because what the data shows.
This is the one with the volume that's pretty low. Let me go ahead and summarize that real quick. I'll kind of end out the segment. So what I'm going to say is that I enjoyed that. I like Brad. I like that he's independent. I think he's wrong on some things, but that's okay. And effectively, the three things that I took as notes that I would want to talk to him about it are microaggressions aren't real. Microaggressions are real. I can say some racist shit every now and then, and I'm sure that a Hispanic guy or a black guy or a black girl or a Hispanic girl, they might go, ugh, where they're just kind of like, it's not enough to get pissed off at, but it's enough to be annoyed by, right? And so that's a microaggression. And so if somebody says, like, for instance, earlier, it's not really a microaggression, but when people were being like dismissive about white farming homicides in South Africa, if you were allowing me to be microaggressed, I would consider that a microaggression. You insulted me a little bit. It's not enough for me to get like super upset by, but it's enough for me to say something about it, right? The left can't define a woman. Yes, they can. And I want to talk to him about that. The reason why you don't see liberals and progressives and leftists fighting as much as they probably should in order to build a more coherent version of the world or vision of the world is because they know that it's going to damage the coalition and they need the coalition in order to beat Trump. misinformation, defer to freedom, and community notes, that's actually based. So I'm going to go ahead and say that Brad was based, but I want to talk to him in the future. I'm going to go ahead and catch up with chat real quick. And to be honest, it's an early day, but I might wrap only because I have a few projects that I need to take out today. Manny to the Max says, I hate this cartoon. It ignores opportunity versus outcome. Connor, what are your top 5 political ideologies? I would say capital L, liberalism. Maximal freedom from the government is probably my favorite. I would say my second favorite is probably fascism, political corporatism with flexible authoritarianism, because while I don't like the flexible authoritarianism aspect of fascism, I think political corporatism is actually the way that a lot of people think by default. Socialism and communism, I think, are incredibly cringe. I don't think we're going to decommodify basic human needs or have workers own the means of production. That being said, in the future, we might become so rich that eventually that happens. And then with communism, I don't think we'll ever live in a moneyless, stateless, classless society. Monarchy, I would probably prefer like some kind of parliamentary monarchy than I would socialism or communism, believe it or not. All right. Parasocial love. Have a beautiful day. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.